Hello, everyone. My name is Aaron Ladage, and I am an architect at a company called DEG based out of Kansas City. And I'm here today to talk to you about content as a service, or more specifically about Contentful, which is a specific platform that brands itself as content as a service. I'm a pretty frequent speaker at conferences. However, this is the first time I've had to do a pre-recorded one, so I feel like I'm a little bit speaking into a black hole here. So I'll try to do my best, but I won't save time at the end for questions since no one is here to talk to me except for the cats. So like I said, today we're going to talk about Contentful and CaaS in general and what effects those are having on content management and digital experiences in general. So without further ado, let's talk a little bit about this. So we're going to talk a little today about Contentful, but I'll also have a demo so you can see what some of these, what this platform is all about and how this leads into DX and digital experiences. So I think in order to understand where content management is heading, you really have to have a good feel for where content has come from. So content management is nothing new. Obviously, it's been around almost as long as the web itself has been. And if you think back to kind of the origins of content management, it really started in the early 2000s, when we were talking about dynamic web content management systems. Those were usually server-side systems. You think of kind of your large early contenders in that space, your WordPresses, your Drupals, kind of your traditional, I would say most people would call content management systems. They're usually rendering on the fly. So there's usually a database behind the scenes. And then when the user requests that page, it's serving it up at runtime. And that's, where CMS has got their start. I think in the 2010s, what we saw was the advent of these large scale DX platforms, especially in the enterprise space. So when we're talking about those platforms, a lot of times we're talking about big enterprise level names, names like Adobe with Adobe Experience Manager, or Sitecore, or large scale platforms such as that. And what we're really seeing today in the last few years is this advent of headless and again, content as a service platforms, kind of taking the lead on where the industry is going with content management. And if you've heard terms like JAMstack, obviously those kind of new approaches to building and serving the web have had a really big impact on how we also manage the content. So like I said, when we talk about legacy CMS, some examples of those pretty big names we've all heard before, names like WordPress, Drupal, Sitecore, Adobe Experience Manager, those are some pretty obvious names that come to mind. They all kind of share some core characteristics. And I'm going to run through a few of those, and I don't mean to kind of pigeonhole all these platforms the same way. Obviously, they have their own unique ways of doing things and their own strengths and weaknesses, but they do kind of fall into some similar categories or some similar ways of working. The first thing that you'll find with a lot of these platforms is that they're fairly monolithic, and that's by design. That's not a derogatory term. They're designed to be kind of this hub of all of your digital content management. A lot of times that means they have kind of a predefined feature set that's already built in. So whether you need personalization or internationalization or really robust asset management systems, these legacy CMSs tend to take that approach where when they're selling themselves to potential customers, that's a selling point because they can say, we're a one-stop shop. If you need pretty much anything under the sun, here's our feature set and here's what our platform can do to handle these features for you. They also are very tightly coupled to the presentation layer. And with most of these platforms, you're usually talking about a web CMS in a lot of cases. So in the old days, when we were talking just about building websites and web applications, this worked pretty well. Your content and your presentation are really tightly coupled together. So your web server and your database work together behind the scenes of your CMS so that when a visitor visits your site, they access essentially you're running CMS, it goes to the web server and the database and it gets the information it needs, it compiles it down to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and it serves that back to the end user in a compiled format. But again, that presentation layer is very tightly coupled. I want everybody to keep that in mind, that that's kind of a core thing with legacy CMSs. It does become more difficult when you start talking about other mediums or other presentation layers that need to be taken into account. And that's kind of the problem with traditional CMS. So when you're talking about traditional CMS, something like this approach is pretty easy. When you need to serve just a responsive web design from a single website across maybe a couple device screen sizes. This kind of thing's pretty easy. But this starts to become more difficult. And if you think about where digital experiences are headed in 2021 and beyond, probably faster than we can even see coming, the website, and not just the website, but responsive websites that flex to fit multiple devices, are quickly kind of becoming only one piece of the larger puzzle. So yes, we are probably still doing that initial website creation that can scale across devices, but we might also be creating, for example, something that scales to a smartwatch or to a voice skill or to a native application. Maybe you're even building a virtual reality experience. Or the last little square there is what do you do with store kiosks or in-store experiences? Wouldn't it be great if your CMS or your content platform could actually be the single source of truth for all of these different avenues, rather than having to kind of silo these? And this is really tricky for traditional CMSs. Another kind of issue with legacy CMSs is they don't always give contextual meaning or structure or hierarchy to the content itself. RTEs, or rich text editors, or WYSIWYGs, as some people would call them, were kind of the crowning achievement, I would say, of legacy CMSs, because they're customer friendly, right? So as your author is logging into the CMS, they need to create a page or a piece of content. These rich text editors are often sold as kind of an easy feature. They look like Microsoft Word, they look like Google Docs, and it's really easy for people with limited technical experience to be able to author their pages or their applications. And they don't really have to have a whole lot of technical knowledge, as I said. The problem with them is that RTEs, or rich text editors, a lot of times are kind of a black hole of content. They're like the Hotel California of content, right? Once it checks in, it can never leave, because everything in an RTE kind of becomes a black hole. Once it goes in, we don't have any structure or meaning or hierarchy in that content other than the way it's entered. And the other issue there is, a lot of times, because of how CMSs associate that view layer that we discussed a moment ago with the management experience, once that content gets associated with a specific page or a specific component instance, it becomes really tightly coupled to that page or that component. It's really difficult to get that content back out and repurpose it in other places. So with a little bit of understanding of where we've come from, I think it's important next to understand where we're going, or where I see the future of content as a service fitting into this larger picture. So CaaS, or content as a service, is kind of the next generation. Like I said, this is stepping into that new headless sort of structured content management system. So a few names you'll hear here are Contentful, which is what we'll talk about today, Content Stack, Amplience, Kentico Content, and then a few others, Bloomreach, eSpirit. You may hear some of these names. I'm going to speak specifically about Contentful because that is kind of our platform of choice at DEG when it comes to our content as a service offerings. So this is kind of our A player that we bring to the market, and it's a great platform that we really are very happy with, and it's incredibly full featured, and I like a lot. But I don't want to discount other content as a service platforms by saying this. There are other contenders out there that do content as a service, and I think it's more of the mindset of what CaaS is. It's this approach that CaaS takes, not necessarily which platform you're using. So just something to keep in mind when you're shopping around for a CaaS service. So as opposed to a legacy CMS, which takes that sort of monolithic approach, content as a service tends to take more of an a la carte approach. In Contentful, they call this a stack-based approach. And the goal here with CaaS is to intentionally solve just one piece of that digital experience puzzle. Contentful in particular solves content, and it solves it exceptionally well. It's a very well-built content platform, but it doesn't try to be everything like a kind of a legacy monolithic CMS might try to do. It just tries to do content, and it does it really well. The idea here, and this is where the term stack-based experience comes from, is that we can then take that best of breed content experience and we can infinitely combine it with other specialized products or plugins. And at least with the case of Contentful, we're talking about open APIs here. So if there is another service or plugin that has an open API similar to what Contentful has, it's entirely possible to combine and reconfigure what your digital experience and your digital management experience looks like by building out the stack that best suits your needs or your project's needs. The other nice thing about this is because all we're really doing in here is content, it's also possible to intermingle CaaS content with traditional CMS content. You might be thinking, why would I want to bring two CMSs into the same world? And that's a fair question. Specifically, where I like to talk about here is a lot of e-commerce platforms. So e-commerce platforms do e-commerce very well, as they should. If they're not, they're doing something wrong, since that's their intent. But they don't always do content very well. And the great thing about CaaS is the content can kind of be pushed and pulled in and out of it. And it really is just serving that content purpose. It's very easy to intermingle it with traditional CMSs or traditional e-commerce platforms. So you can get kind of a best of both worlds based on your project needs and platforms that you have involved. So another core characteristic of content as a service is that in most of these platforms, they are completely decoupled from presentation. If you've worked in a traditional CMS that you probably know that they all have sort of their own view layer or templating language that a lot of times you have to work within to get the code going in and the content going in to render out correctly on the front end. Most CaaS services or CaaS systems don't even have a presentation layer. And with the case of Contentful, that's definitely true. It doesn't have the concept of a view layer. That lets us choose how and where we want to present our content. And when we're talking about something like an omnichannel experience where we might be pushing out to a voice skill or to multiple websites or to virtual reality experience or a native application, anything like that, we really get to choose how and where we're presenting that content. It's much more flexible, and we can really optimize the view experience based on the channel as opposed to basing it on the view restrictions of the CMS itself. And this works exceptionally well in most modern kind of headless and static site generated or Jamstack driven projects. And the other thing too, as developers, we all are partial to our frameworks, and we're partial to our build tools. It's almost tribal at this point of what campus everybody is in. For us at DEG, we're mostly a React shop, but if your shop is a Vue shop or an Angular shop, whatever your case may be, and whether your build tools are Gatsby or Next or any other static site generation system, there's no real limitation to where you can pull a CaaS system into your platform, because you're really just dealing with content and structured content. And as long as your platform of choice can pull that content in, you're pretty much able to use almost any CaaS system under the sun. I want to talk a little bit about Contentful itself and sort of what it tries to accomplish and the way that it works. So I mentioned third-party systems. This is kind of the flow of information with Contentful of how it goes from the original input into all the way out to the output, and what really makes Contentful powerful. So I mentioned third-party systems. There's the actual Contentful web app. So this is the view layer. View layer is the wrong word. The management system for managing Contentful content. So that, whether you're talking about that or possibly your product information management system for an e-com system or cloud storage, anything like that, anything that is third-party that has open APIs, those can be pulled into Contentful via the content management API. So that's kind of the in API for Contentful. And it's interesting to note that the Contentful actual web app is called out there as third-party because it eats its own dog food. It's interacting with Contentful as an infrastructure via its own API. So needless to say, it's a very powerful input API. From there, you're basically talking about the Contentful user management API. And then that feeds out to its delivery mechanisms. So there is a delivery API. There's also a really powerful preview API, which is very handy for anyone who's dealt in static site generation before. This lets you preview content that hasn't yet been published, so you can really lean into features in certain static site generators such as Next.js that have preview capabilities, so that you can see preview content without actually having to publish it out to a website or wait for a static site build, things like that. And then it actually has incredibly powerful image APIs built into, which hopefully today in our quick demo, I'll be able to show you a little bit of what we can do there. So, and then that's really our only interface between Contentful itself as structured content and the applications that we're building or the channels that we're building. So again, whether you're building a kiosk or a native app or a website or some sort of in-store experience, there's no real limitation to what you can build with Contentful, so long as you're able to pull the structured content into it via its delivery mechanisms and its APIs. I want to go back to this slide real quick. I touched on delivery API, but probably should have hit on it a little bit more. That's the actual content delivery there. So that's a full CDN-driven API, and that's available in both RESTful flavors and GraphQL flavors. So depending on what you're doing and kind of your querying language of choice, that's what you can do there. So the way this works in a static site generation instance is, just to show it kind of a different way, is you have your application code base, which could be anything, but in my case, I'm going to show it as React and Redux. And then you've got your headless CMS being Contentful, and you may have some other things that are pulling directly into Contentful there. So maybe you've hooked up Contentful with a third-party digital asset management system, or maybe you have an integration with an e-commerce platform, something like that. Whenever content is changed or code is changed, this is an important clarification here, that's going to be wired up to trigger a static site build. And I'm talking, when we have a Jamstack set up here. So any change via code, via like a git push, a branch push, or any change to Contentful content itself, and that's being triggered via a webhook within Contentful, that's going to trigger your static site generation system to build your site. So that's how you get static out from the other end, is from that mechanism. And then that's still not preventing us from using what we would use in any sort of optimized front-end experience, which is client-side APIs. So maybe our search or email services, or some microservices for commerce, widgets, that sort of thing. Maybe your comment system, all of that. We can still make client-side API calls after that build process is complete and after our site is live. So doing that at runtime as opposed to build time. Still very much possible with a static site build with Contentful on the back end. I mentioned that we talked a little bit about the black hole of content in the traditional CMS, and that is a stark difference from how CaaS treats things. Obviously, if you're going to be a content service, it's important that your content means something, and that's at the core of Contentful and most CaaS systems. So all content in Contentful is contextual and hierarchical. It has meaning. That has a lot to do with a process in Contentful that is called content modeling. And I'll talk a little bit more about content modeling when we go through our demo and show where that actually goes, where that takes place and what effect it has. So the idea that content is modeled means that, excuse me, you're basing your content on what it is and not how it's likely to be displayed in a specific medium. So think of this as defining sort of an object, so what a thing is and all of its different characteristics. You're not going to define what it's going to necessarily look like on the web page. You certainly can model those delivery mechanisms in Contentful, and I'll show that a little bit as well. But the core of modeling comes down to identifying what things are as opposed to how they're being presented. And that's what gives us a lot of our contextual and reusable value. And the interesting thing that I find interesting about CaaS is even the rich text editor that is built into Contentful is still contextual and hierarchical. There's no concept of rendered HTML that comes out of a Contentful RTE. All you're getting back is structured JSON that tells you exactly what every single line and character of that RTE content is, whether it's a paragraph or a list or bold, anything like that. It all has structural meaning. So when you take that content out of Contentful and you move it into presentation, you're able to restructure and reconfigure that and style it as you need to based on the medium that's calling it in. So some strengths of content as a service. It's highly reconfigurable. In other words, it can be reused. The content coming out of it can be kind of rejiggered on the fly as needed. It's very easy to do via content modeling. And then on the other flip side of things, on the retrieval of content end, you're able to change things via GraphQL queries to basically return exactly what you need content-wise. It's the perfect solution for multi-channel, omni-channel projects or clients where you might need to develop multiple projects. It's also future-proof is one thing I like to call out. You might only be building a website today, but maybe in the next 6 months to a year to 5 years, you may start moving into the world of multiple websites or native applications or store kiosks, who knows? So it's important to have a solution powering your content that has the ability to flex and grow and scale with you when your projects scale. It's great when content needs context. I think far too often, like I said, we just kind of lose that when we put content into CMSs, but with when your content has context, you're able to repurpose and pull it back out in much more flexible ways. And then it feeds really well into really highly performant, optimized front-end experiences, which is what my screenshot is on the left. This was one of my first Contentful projects, and I basically compared a previous site that I built on a traditional CMS with my very first attempt at it was actually a Gatsby project with Contentful powering it behind the scenes. And I can say that the CaaS system itself played no impact in the performance on the front end, but Gatsby, obviously, since that's one of its key focuses, was able to really optimize around turning that content into a really highly optimized front end performance. Gave me those super awesome lighthouse scores coming out the other end. Strengths of Contentful specifically. I can't say if all CaaS systems would have stuff like this, but these are some of the features built into Contentful. And I want to spend some time going through these. I mentioned that it doesn't try to do everything. It tries to do content really well. But one thing that it does do is internationalization. So it has the concept of a multi-locale setup. So I think the reason that they include internationalization in their feature set is you know, multilingualism or multilocalism is directly tied to content. So this wouldn't be something that you'd want to add on via the stack that you're trying to build with your platform. So it has this out of the box, and it's incredibly powerful and frankly pretty easy to set up. The next one is what's called the Contentful App Framework. And so the Contentful App Framework is an SDK that allows you to actually build customizations to the Contentful web interface itself. And actually, I'm working on one of these as a project right now. And it's amazing to actually be able to customize the CMS experience and to add custom functionality without worrying about breaking the product itself, and to be able to tie all this custom functionality directly into the interface. It's the first CMS platform that I've dealt with, at least, that really gives you kind of a first-class citizen approach to customizing the interface and adding functionality. The third option, or the third bullet and the fourth bullet actually don't get spoken about enough, but they are incredibly powerful features built into Contentful. I'm going to start with number 4, which is environments. So Contentful allows you to have a multi-environment setup. So think of environments almost like branches as you would in version control. So we may have a master environment that our clients are working from and our content authors for production work. But what Contentful does is gives us the ability to spin up very quickly new environments based off of that environment. We can spin up and spin down new environments in a matter of seconds. And so those new environments become basically exact copies of the environment that we're cloning them off of. So then we can work on content in isolation apart from the production code base, or the production content base, I should say, without fear of interfering with production deployments or production content or anything like that. Aliases gets a little down in the weeds, but aliases are a really powerful feature that let us change what the definition of an environment is on the fly. So the idea there is we may have a production environment that's powering the production code base. Then we may spin up a new environment, and we'll call that the working environment for making some sort of change on production. With an alias, all we have to do is basically change what the alias is pointing to. So we may now say that our production environment is, or our production alias now points at this new working environment, and that our one that used to serve production is sort of decommissioned. And then on the fly, that's going to trigger a new site build, and we automatically have all of this new working content as our new production environment. And if you're thinking this through in the reverse, let's say we run into a problem there. We can also revert that just as fast as we can create it. So if we push out this new production environment, for example, and something has gone terribly wrong, it's as simple as changing that alias back to the old environment and waiting for a 5 to 10 minute site rebuild. And we're back in business with the unbroken code in pretty much any environment we're working in. So excuse me, environments and aliases is a very powerful set of features. Migration scripting I could go on about for pretty much an entire talk of its own. But migration scripting, I'd encourage everyone to look for a white paper that Contentful developed called CMS as Code. And CMS as Code has basically become our Bible for working in Contentful at DEG. The idea of a migration script is that it is a code-driven script that defines what our content models look like in Contentful. So rather than working in Contentful's visual interface for defining content models, which is a lovely interface, we don't use that. And what we do instead is we write scripts. So we write a migration script that defines exactly what every content type looks like, what all the fields are on those content types, and how those, what kind of validations those fields have, all kinds of features like that. And the real power here is not just that we can script what the model looks like, but we can also then use that migration script in tandem with all the other migration scripts to feed into our CI/CD and automated deployment processes, so that as we move across our environments, we can automate the creation and updates to our content model without any fear of breaking the website or having content be out of sync with the content management system or a view layer or anything like that. It all just kind of plays nicely together. And then webhooks I kind of already mentioned. It's great if you have this powerful CMS, but if it can't trigger things like new static site builds, it's not of much value. That's where webhooks come in. We can actually tell Contentful to cause a new CI/CD build or possibly a new indexing of our search results. Anything like that can be triggered from webhooks. So Contentful can speak to other platforms just as easily as other platforms can speak to Contentful. I call this weaknesses, but I don't know if that's the right word for what I want to show you here. I would say more of just a lot of learning curve more than anything. Content modeling as a concept is easy to learn, but I think you could actually spend a lifetime mastering it. And that has less to do with any sort of weaknesses with the platform and more to do with that content modeling is really the process of understanding your stakeholders' business requirements and feature requirements, and translating that from kind of a content strategy point of view into actual code. And the key here with content modeling is you want to make content as reusable and scalable as possible. You don't want your authors having to enter the same thing 6 times, but at the same time, you don't want to make it so flexible that they don't know what their content is actually controlling. So I think getting that model exactly right is it's time consuming and it can take a little while to master. But as far as a process, it's pretty easy to learn. It's just it becomes an art form at a certain point. I would say that client training can have a little learning curve too. When you're handing these off to your content authors, the platform itself is very easy to learn. What we often find is that they do have a little bit of a learning curve on understanding that decoupling of content from presentation. Contentful makes this easier in a couple of different ways. The big one is they have something built in called preview mode, which I already spoke briefly about. And as you're authoring content, there's a button on the page that says preview. And if you wire that up correctly into your code base, you can actually make it so that they can preview what their unpublished content looks like as they're authoring it. So that has definitely helped a lot with reducing the learning curve. And then I mentioned that CaaS intentionally takes an a la carte or stack-based approach to building out a digital experience. That's by design. I wouldn't call that a weakness. In fact, I would say that gives you the opportunity to use best of breed stack for your projects, as opposed to a monolithic solution where you kind of have to use, what it does for search or what it does for personalization, that sort of thing. With this a la carte approach, as long as you can find tools that talk to each other, you can probably make them work together pretty easily. Contentful has a good sized list of customizations and third-party integrations that it has out of the box. So that kind of stuff is very easy. I think what becomes trickier there is you really become a liaison for your clients and your stakeholders for what that stack needs to look like. So you're doing a lot more planning and decision-making on what tools are the best fit for what they're trying to accomplish with their project. So with that is actually all that I have as kind of a very high level about what Contentful is. So now I want to show what Contentful does. Let me stop and share here real quickly. This is the part where I normally ask if anyone has any questions, but I obviously can't do that. Here we go. All right, so I'm going to give a little bit of a demo of Contentful and just show the interface itself. And then what I really want to do is step through how we get content back out of Contentful, so you can see some of the power there that we have. Okay, everyone can see here. So this is the first screen that you land on when you log into Contentful, and I just have a little POC space here that I set up. What we're going to do today is we're going to pretend that we are a shoe manufacturer. We're a company that makes shoes. Actually just bought a new pair of shoes, so this one's hitting home for me here. So the first step when you're working within Contentful, as I mentioned, is the content model itself. So that's going to be under this tab. You'll see this is basically our main menu here. When you're establishing what your content model looks like, you're either going to be working in migration scripts, or you're going to come to this content model section. Your authors will primarily live in this world right here, which is where their actual content entries live. Contentful also functions as a really full-featured DAM, as a really full-featured digital asset manager. So they can get direct access to their media, their images, and that sort of thing. We'll touch this for just a second as I'm going through this demo. And then, as I mentioned, there is the Contentful app framework, which lets you actually embed custom experiences directly into the Contentful experience. We're actually going to use that today because I want to show you how we can pull content out of Contentful using, in this case, we're going to use GraphQL. And I'm doing that through a Contentful app called GraphQL Playground. So this is more of a developer tool. This may not necessarily be an app that your authors are going to get a lot of use out of, but I'm just using it as a demo of the app framework here. So the first thing I want to show you is the content model. So as I said, we are a shoe company, and we've been asked to, got a few pages I meant to delete, these ones that say do not delete. We're being asked to set up the content model for our shoe store, or for our shoe company, I should say. And so we're going to model out our content, and we want to model, well, the first thing I want to show you is some of the media that I've got living in the DAM system. So we've got 3 shoes. We have our rubber ducky, which is this nice rubber boot. And for anyone who missed it, I should have said this a little more clearly. I went into the media tab. So this is just basically the DAM. This is the asset library. And you'll see here, we don't have a lot of fields that we can fill out. And that's kind of by design. Remember, with Contentful, we are trying to model what the item is. We're not necessarily modeling its presentation layer or trying to attach too much context to any one thing. We want to make sure we have context in the places where it belongs. Excuse me. So for the asset itself, we don't want too much because we want to be able to contextualize that elsewhere. So all that's really going into the asset manager itself, the media manager itself, is just a title of the item, description field, which I'm not even using here, and then the file itself. So you'll see I've got my 3 shoes. I've got the rubber ducky. I've got the Run Forest Run, which is our running shoe that we make. And I've got the business time. It's a nice little Flight of the Conchords reference here. There's that one. So that's all I've got in the media library. So I'm going to go back to our content model here. If I were making this, this is like a cooking show on TV where they do everything ahead of time because it's a lot easier and safer that things don't go wrong. The first thing I would probably model, since we're a shoe company, is our shoes. So I'm going to show you what that model looks like. When I start modeling a shoe, I would, so this is a content, blanking out here, a content type. There we go. Sorry about that. So a shoe is a content type in Contentful content modeling terminology. So you'll see I would basically go here. I would create a new content model item called shoe. And then you can see that right here. So my item is called shoe. And then I would start attaching information to my shoe content type. So the first thing I would do is give it a title, which is this field here. You'll see I can kind of configure it a bit. It's going to have like a lowercase ID. I can do really impressive validations and appearance tweaks to the Contentful interface itself. These are really, really powerful in my opinion, and not features I've seen in a lot of other CMSs. Obviously, I can make it required. I can make it unique across the entire system, so nothing else can be called the same thing. It's got character count limitations that have all kinds of different ways to set this up. I can use regex to make this field behave a certain way, like treat it like an email address or URL, custom regular expressions. I can, just like I can match to things, I can prohibit certain things. So maybe this is like a bad word list to prevent bad content getting in there. I can also accept specific values. So this would be doing kind of like a predefined value list for your entry. And I can change the actual interface as you're managing things. So maybe you need a drop-down menu or a radio button or a slug field. I'll show you a slug field here in a second. Here's that slug. Slug is the exact same as the short text field, except it's set to slug. Excuse me. This one's going to come up when we start demoing the actual item. And then I want to create an image field. By the way, adding new fields is just clicking here. So I've already added 3 here. So an image field is a little different. In my case, I don't want to make it required, but I do want to allow something from the media library. So to do that, I turn this on, and then I want to only accept images. I don't want anybody attaching a PDF document, for example, because I'm trying to define the image field. So I would just check image, and then that's only going to allow image fields. You'll see I can do some additional validations here, like I can actually set image dimensions for it. And that's going to give me a lot of control over what images can actually be input into this field, and some more appearance things for this. So with that said, I've modeled my shoe now. This is what shoes will look like when I add them to my system. So I'm going to go here and show you, like I said, I cheated and already put the information in. These are our 3 shoes. We've talked about these a little bit: the business time, the forest, and the rubber ducky. So let's look at the business time. And so this is the actual entry, the content entry for that shoe content type. So I give it the name, I give it a slug. This is auto-generated, so as I type, this will be typed. And then I establish the image here, just to show you what that process is like. As I'm authoring this, I can either add new media, so this will make it automatically appear in that media guide, or I can add an existing image. And in this case, I just want to do that. You'll see that my content has entered a change status, and then all I have to do to publish it is press the publish button. So that's what the model for my shoe looks like. I'm going to add some more content though. So I know that I'm going to need to make a website, and that website is going to need videos. So I've modeled something else, which is a video screen. Let me look at something real quick to make sure I'm not speaking with my demo. Yep. All right. So I know that my I know that I also need to associate videos with my shoes. So this is what I would model a video to look like. It's going to have that same title field, same slug field. In this case, I want to do a description. I'm just going to do short text, which is a single line of text. And then I'm not self-hosting. I just want to link to YouTube videos. So I'm going to do a URL and set that up to behave like a URL. So knowing that, let's go look at some authored videos. So the Run Forest Run is going to get a clip from Forrest Gump. The Rubber Ducky is going to get a clip from Sesame Street, and the Business Time is going to get some Flight of the Conchords. So that's not nearly as fun as the got to do Flight of the Conchords here. Here we go. So now I'm the content author, and I've come in here. I want to create a video, so should show this. If I want to add a video, I can do this, or create any other kind of content type that I might have. So you'll see now we're seeing the fields that we put into content model for videos. So we've got the title of the slug, a short description, and then a URL. Even gives you a nice little YouTube preview here. So really nice authoring experience. So that's what it looks like to model objects in Contentful. So these are not contextually relevant. We're really just describing the things that make up our model. Now we need to start looking at what we do when we are moving into the presentation layers of things. This is where I think Contentful really starts to shine when it comes to omni-channel and being able to support lots of different channels and properties and platforms at the same time. So in this case, we're going to make a couple of things. We're going to make a product landing page. Actually, let's start here. We're going to make an actual product page for our shoe. Then we're going to make a product. Sorry, I'm speaking over myself here. Yeah, let's do this. So we're going to make a website product page. So this is just going to be announcing the product itself. So I'm going to start modeling this web page. This web page itself is going to have a title, a slug. It's going to have a product description. Then this is, I think, where some of the real power of Contentful starts to come in, which is reference fields. So reference fields allow you to reference other content types from a content type. And that can be in a one-to-one or a one-to-many form. In this case, I'm making a product page. So I'm going to have a field called product. So in this case, I'm doing what would be a one-to-one reference field. And you can see this because it's called a link. And I'm saying only accept one product type. I could allow it to do multiple. But in my case, I'm making a product type. My product is shoes. So I'm just going to check shoes here. And there's some customizations there. I also want my page to have some rich text. Now, for anybody who's worked with RTEs before, this might blow your mind here. I can actually customize the appearance of my RTE for every single instance that I have an RTE. So for this particular one, I may not want my authors to be able to enter any H tags except for an H2 and an H6. I might want to only allow bold and italic. Maybe I want ordered and unordered list. Maybe I don't. I can also choose what they're allowed to hyperlink to, if anything. But in this case, I'm fine with that. So that alone is, to me, not something you find in a lot of CMSs. And the other thing is, what if as I'm typing in my RTE, I decide that I want to actually pull in an image, or I want to like embed an image, or I want to embed an entire other entry, or this one's really powerful to me. I can have another content type that in line with my current entry, I can just insert here. In this case, I'm going to allow all these things. And tons of validations and customizations you can do on those actual entries. So that's my product page. I'm going to go ahead and go over to a product page now and show you what that would look like if we authored it. So this is introducing a new shoe. This is going to be our business time product page. So I think I said this. Our company is called ABC Shoes. So we're going to show the ABC business time. I made this demo a while ago, so 2021. So you'll see we have the title for our page, we have the slug, we have product description, we have a one-to-one reference to the business time. If I click that, it's going to slide open over top, and I can just see that reference to my shoe content type that I made before. And then I've got rich text, and you'll see that this exactly reflects what we were just talking about. So you can only edit the things that we said. And if in the middle of this, I decide I want to embed, for example, an inline entry, I can do that. I'm not going to do it right now, but I can pull anything in and it'll just appear in line here. And I've associated one video with it. So just like that, I've authored a product page, and I can now pull that content back out. We'll get to pulling the content out with GraphQL in just a second. I'm going to skip these other product landing pages, and I just want to show, now I'm being asked to make a store kiosk. So I need to be able to pull, create a landing page that's going to show all the new shoes for 2021. In one place, and it's going to feed out to a kiosk somewhere in the middle of a JCPenney, for example. So for this, I just want a title, a slug, a description, and then I'm going to do another reference field. But where that last one was called a link field, this is actually a one-to-many field. So instead of one-to-one, it's one-to-many. So I want to be able to pull in more than one entry here. I'm still only allowing shoes, but I want to allow multiples. So if I go look at the store kiosk content entry, so now I'm pretending to be a content author here. I want to show at Nordstrom our 2020 lineup, 2021 lineup. WBC shoes. So I can start authoring. Here's my title. Here's my slug. Here's the description. And then this is that one-to-many field. So I can continue adding them. By the way, there are validations that say only allow 2 items or 4 items or whatever you want to do. Minimum of a certain number, maximum, all that. So I can start adding content. So I can add an existing shoe or new shoes. We said we could only add shoes. So that's all you're going to get in this list. But we can always add more content types if we want to. And then like any good editor, you can move these around and change the order and all that good stuff. So I did mention preview. I don't have it set up for this instance, but if I did, I could go preview what this kiosk screen is going to look like right here. I don't even have to wait for a static site build. So that's some of the power of the Contentful. I could go on for quite a while about additional features, but that's the gist of it. Now let's pretend I'm the developer. So I want to be able to pull this content out. And so in my code base, let's pretend I'm using GraphQL for everything. So I want to be able to pull this out using GraphQL. And at this point, excuse me, at this point, I'm going to basically just be using GraphQL to fully interact with Contentful. So I could do this at runtime, or maybe this is feeding into my static site generation, whatever it might be. So I want to pull out sorry, I'm forgetting my names here. I want to be able to pull out that website product page. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to say I want to get the website product page collection. This is going to give me an array, but I could also pass an ID to get that single one. And I want the title field, the slug, let's see, what else did I have on? There we go. I want to get the product description. I want to get the product. That's going to be no memory today, sorry. And I want to get the page content. I definitely want to show this one. And I'm going to get JSON. And I think the last thing I had to get was, I should have done this. Yeah, I'll start with this one. Oh, there we go. I got to do. Actually, this is good. This is what I wanted to do. So I want to pull back that product, but I just want to get the image. And it's going to probably yell at me again. Yep. And I did mention, let's just get the URL for now. Okay, so this is my GraphQL query. This is just saying, go get that website page collection and pull back these pieces of information. And you'll see here that I got it. I just get structured JSON data back that I can then pull into my application. So I've got the title, the slug, the product description. So this is just a short text field that's just a string of text. I want to come back to image because that's pretty powerful. I talked up the RTE quite a bit earlier, so when I talk through that, you'll see that I do get back JSON. But not only do I get back what you would expect from JSON, I'm getting actual contextual meaning to all of this. So for example, if you remember lorem ipsum dolor being our heading, that actually comes back with a node type of heading 2. I actually get back each individual paragraph as a node type of paragraph, and it tells me what it is. This would be an additional paragraph. And if you're looking at this thinking, oh God, that looks horrific to reassemble into structured HTML, Contentful has a series of utilities that let you do this fairly seamlessly. So you just plug your JSON into it and it'll spit out HTML for you. So you're not really doing a lot of additional work here. So that's pretty powerful. The one thing I wanted to mention was the image portion of the URL, or image portion of the API. Where you can actually do all kinds of validations on the fly, and I am not going to know these off the top of my head. Yeah, I should have looked this one up ahead of time. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm going to be a bad guesser at this. If you can see what I was going for here, not only do I just get the image back, but I can actually make quite a few optimizations and changes to that image on the fly. So for example, not only can I get back the URL, I can get back a file name. There it is. I can pull back different formats. I think I'm going to be able to do this well without, so I can pull back different widths and heights, sizes, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to remember how to do this. Nope, sorry, I'm not going to get it off without looking it up. I can actually pull back different file formats. So if I want to pull this back as a base64 encoded image, or an SVG, or even a low-level rasterized image, so that I can load that really quickly and then load in my high-res, ping later on, whatever it might be, WebP file, whatever it is. I can do that just by changing some settings here and pulling back additional data, all baked into the API. So with that, I notice I am at time, so I'm going to wrap this up. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Hopefully this was instructive and gave you some information on how to use Contentful and CaaS in your projects and move into the next era of content management that's coming with CaaS and with Contentful. Thank you for your time.
Hey, it's Joe Eames with ng-conf. If you like that video, be sure to click subscribe either here or here, somewhere over here. And if you're looking for something more, here's another video for you to watch here or there or somewhere.